Good morning, guys. Welcome to Talking Cannabis. Thanks for joining me this morning. Can
How's
you hear
everybody
me?
doing? Yeah.
Yep. Here you
That's
can't
always how you start a YouTube, right? Can you hear me? Is this
No, we
working?
can hear you, Todd.
Right. This morning we're going to be talking to Victor Pinho of Emerald Farm Tours. Hi, Victor. Brandon Rust, cultivator in
going,
Oklahoma
everybody?
and owner of Bokashi. How do you say that? Bokashi?
Bokashi Earthworks.
And the legendary William Drake, author of Marijuana Cultivators Handbook and many other wonderful books. How are you guys doing this morning?
pretty good. Thanks.
Tony?
A lot going on in cannabis.
Yeah.
Always a lot of new stuff going on in cannabis too. So much to keep up on.
Yeah.
What's new in the world of you're in Oklahoma, right, Brandon?
Yeah, Oklahoma is still the Wild West of weed. We're still trying to push the laws. But me and Todd had a podcast that we did last week. We were talking about State Question 818 and 819, and it's to make constitutional medical and constitutional rec, which would implement those into the state's constitution. So that way, when they go to session, because every state goes to session, they'll make new laws, change things. Cannabis is always a target, no matter what state you're in. Huge. And so people always try to make laws, and they'll push laws, and lobby groups will do things like that. If you get this vote through, it becomes into the state's constitution, and that doesn't happen. It negates that. They could write all the statute and legislation that they want, but it's not going to change anything. It doesn't mean anything. So this is basically like the people are pulling a trump card on the legislators by doing this.
Yeah. It makes it a constitutional right for the state's members, people of the state to have it and possess it, right?
Yeah.
Is this a ballot initiative?
Yeah, so what we have to do is we have to get 179,000 signatures, and then it'll get put onto the ballot, and then it has to get voted on.
How tough is it going to be to get 179,000?
We already started collecting signatures, actually. I picked up boxes of things and handed them out personally to the dispensaries all over Oklahoma City, out here in Southeast Oklahoma. Anybody that wants them, they know how to get. And I'm working with another organization. That's all grassroots. It's just people that it's same guy wrote those that got 788, our current medical program, which was the way that it was written out was low licensing. So we didn't need like social equity, social equity to me is it like a red flag that something's already messed up with the way that the laws were written, So that was easy entry into Oklahoma. And so, it's, they called it the Wild West because a lot of people were able to come in really quickly, and but you got to be good
in Oregon too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're good at business and cultivation, and you can be really successful at building a brand, but you have to be good at business as well.
So you need to get 179,000 people off the couch and up to sign a petition.
Yeah, and I'm pretty active about getting on social media and telling people what's going on.
If they understand, they'll do it.
Yeah, it's we have enough registered cannabis users to get this thing passed. So I don't think it should be an issue as long as people understand that it's going to be beneficial to everybody, including the patients. Because really, when it comes down to it, the patients get the most benefit out of being able to have quality and accessible, when it comes to affordability.
You said something,
for cannabis.
Brandon, you said something a moment ago that was very fascinating to me. You said that the social equity model was kind of a trigger for you, that something was already wrong. And what I will say to that is that I've always thought that we should all have had our the level playing field, like zero barrier to entry when all this started, right?
Yeah.
We should have just leveled the playing field for everyone, made zero barrier to entry, and figured it out a year in.
And I'll tell you why you're exactly right. And because regardless of if you get into the business, it stimulates the economy as a whole, right? Low entry, because what people do is they will go and take a shot at it. If your licensing is only $2,500, then you can be vertically integrated, like in Oklahoma, where you can spend $2,500, get a cultivation license, spend another $2,500, get a processing, get a dispensary license for $2,500. Dude, you can make a completely vertically integrated business model. Now, even if you don't do that, and even if you're not successful, people will go and spend money to build their dream and to try to go take a shot at that. And that means that the realtors are going to make money. It means look at all the ancillary businesses, realtors, right? The HVAC guys, the electricians, the contractors, the grow stores. Like, it generates economic prosperity as a whole. So, and then if you're really good at business, even if, like, because the biggest argument about, oh, well, it's flooded, or there's a lot, and people be like, oh, there's a lot of booth. But it's like, the thing is, it allowed a lot of people from a lot of places to come in here and operate that do quality, you know. So this place also has a lot of really good quality as well. And if you're able to be good at business, that's my biggest thing. Like, I had to learn about business because, you know, I came from the traditional market, and my clientele were like homies and shit that were slanging my weed, you know. And it was like, it's not like that now.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to have a business sense, and you have to figure all this out. It has to be your marketing, your distribution. You have to figure out your analytics for your cost, for how much it costs to produce a pound.
I'm always surprised by how many people go into business, any business, regardless of cannabis or otherwise. I'm always surprised by how many people go into business without ever having done a spreadsheet or a pro forma to understand the costs and the inputs for their business, you know, cash flow and stuff like that. So it's a basic projection. So I've always thought it was really silly when people just like push open their doors and never did the calculation to see if this was a feasible operation. But to your point, Brandon, I'm really kind of intrigued by the Oklahoma model of just like kick down the door and do whatever you want for a very low barrier to entry. And I've always thought that was very much in the spirit of 215, right? It was very much in the spirit of like, do it now. We have the avenue. We'll figure it out later. And I think that most legalization programs across the United States should have rolled out this way, should have rolled out with just a year of just like, let everybody figure this out. And let's not just sell this off to corporate entities.
215, I think, is a bad example because it didn't legalize our activities at all, and it was really a clusterfuck from jump. Right. And realistically, you know, it was 20 years of hell for a lot of us because there wasn't cohesive legal language to follow. You couldn't go by the rules. There were no rules. It was really subjective to, if your cousins were cops, maybe you didn't get busted. If you were like me and you wouldn't cooperate, you were getting prosecuted.
Yeah.
And it was really unfair. And I hated 215. 215, you know, the whole reason I supported Prop 64 is because of Section 903 of the Controlled Substances Act. I paid a very expensive and had to sacrifice a lot to learn one sentence in the CSA. And the reality is that 215 did not legalize our activities. So what happened is there was no conflict created with the federal government, and it gave the government the ability to come in and prosecute people in states where, like with California, it gave them the ability to prosecute people like me and so many others. Once we passed real legalization, Section 903 kicked in, and then there was a protection barrier between what was happening, the activities in the state, and the federal rules. And legalization has been a really important part of it. A lot of states are getting it wrong. I think social equity programs are screwed. I don't think that the social equity should be placed on businesses that are trying to get off the ground themselves. I think that the social equity should be the burden of the state, which was actually the agent that was stealing from us, locking us up, causing us to get lawyers, causing us to go to court constantly, and impeding our ability to do anything. So they should be the ones. Right. They should be the ones that are incubating the less fortunate and the people like me. I mean, when we legalized, I tried to get a job and I couldn't even get a job in the cannabis industry because I had
Neither.
I had felonies on my record.
Yeah,
for
same with
cannabis.
me. And that's the
Yeah.
same thing that happened with me. And that's why as soon as I had opportunity elsewhere, I jumped on it. Because it didn't make sense, because when I got out in November 2018, that was the second prison term I did for cannabis, right? I had already been doing it for so long at that period of time, and I was overqualified for all the things that I was trying to apply for, but I was willing to take even a $11 or $12 an hour job just to do the grunt work to get my foot in the door. And I would have done it, and I would have excelled that way, but it just made it absolutely impossible, because nobody that was looking at my record was going to be like, nah, this isn't going to work. But here in Oklahoma, it was different. And I was worried. I was like, can I even operate legally out there? And they had a clause that they're a right to work state. So it's not a violent crime out here. And I had already done 18 months total. And when I had actually been convicted was further than that. It says 2 years from conviction that you can have whatever rights you have back, unless you're a violent offender, right? So I was totally in the clear to be able to come out here and work, as a private consultant or as a paid employee.
The funny thing, though, that you mentioned, like, Todd, to your point, Todd, I think what a lot of these, and to your point, Brandon, I mean, a lot of these equity developments, these developments in equity programs in every state, what they've done is essentially created more bureaucracy for people of color and the disenfranchised to navigate. Exactly. And so it's like, okay, we've already got this complex bureaucracy and system to get your permit through. Now let's create a parallel system for people that just don't have the means or the ways or the education or the financing to do another parallel process of bureaucracy. So I hear you, Todd, and I hear you, Brandon. I've always thought that, like, we should have just pulled the rug right out from under this thing, made everybody have access to equal level playing field in this industry, and then guys like you, Brandon, wouldn't have to be figuring this out the way you did, right? It would have just been,
it's interesting because I was born and raised in San Diego, so I come from a place that has phenomenal weather. It's beautiful. The women are absolutely gorgeous. And I came out here to Oklahoma, and I'm like, this is,
sacrifice.
It's not though. I mean, I thought it was going to be terrible. I thought, people are like, you're going to have a hard time acclimating, but I love it out here. I mean, the people are friendly. The environment is great. Like, there's literally places that if you can smoke a cigarette on a balcony of your favorite bar, you can also smoke weed there. You can bust out your Puffco for the most part, unless that bar isn't cannabis friendly. But for the most part, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. You can go to a show and a concert and freely smoke and not have to worry about, getting tickets. And I mean, they have event centers where they'll have a dispensary and they'll have a bar and they'll have a concert going on, events like that. I mean, it's great, man. It's not like a thing. Nobody's freaking out.
Brandon, let me ask you, I agree with you and Victor completely about the bankruptcy of social equity programs. There shouldn't be programs. There should just be social equity. But my question is, you being in Oklahoma with so many Native Americans in Oklahoma, are they just naturally a part of this cannabis revolution, or do they have to go through something to grow on native lands because they're federally administered?
No, because it's so inclusive. That's the issue. Like, when I hear social equity, I feel like, oh, it's because you guys weren't already inclusive to begin with. Oh, now you have to try to be. You guys are trying to make. They're trying to make a scapegoat. Yeah, they're trying to make it's like a scapegoat. Oh, we're gonna throw these people a bone. Like that's and it's like that is, and it just makes it even more complicated too. Now, what they should have done from the beginning was just make it like they did in Oklahoma and make easy access. There's tons of native Indian people out that are from Oklahoma that are in this business. A lot of them
running dispensaries on tribal land.
just as many as other places.
Yeah.
You know,
Can I clarify something though, Bill? Because so tribal land is not state land; it's federal land technically.
Right. That's what I said.
And
It's
anything that
federally
happens in the state does not legalize activities on the res. And unfortunately, if anything happens on the res, it's not the state police who respond; it's the federal police. So they're really completely two jurisdictions. And unfortunately, because the laws change in Oklahoma, does not mean the laws change federally for the natives living on the reservations, unfortunately. And even worse is when I was in federal prison, every single one of those, if you do anything on a reservation, it's a federal case. It's not a state case. You steal a car on a reservation, you go to federal prison, not state prison, because that's the jurisdiction that you go to court in. So really they don't have the options that the people who live outside the reservation in Oklahoma or California do.
I understand those points. In fact, when I started Santa Fe Natural Tobacco Company, we worked with Native Americans on the reservations growing tobacco. But my question was, in Oklahoma, is there any bureaucracy on top of the Native Americans, or are they free to join the gold rush?
No, they're not. Because of the federal government, they're not.
Not on tribal land.
Yeah.
They're all over Oklahoma.
The answer to that question is there are a lot of natives that are involved in cannabis. Whether or not they're doing it on federal land or on their reservations, they're probably not doing it. But I see, native owned businesses, dispensaries, cultivation,
that was my question.
Processing. Yeah, they are here.
That's awesome.
That's all I was asking. I know about tribal lands.
Dude, we have minority-owned businesses. We have women-owned businesses.
Sure.
It's because when you have 7,500 plus businesses, actually, if you included the dispensaries and the processing, you're probably looking at over 10,000 cannabis businesses.
Right.
And they're not just a bunch of huge corporations. These are all small mom-and-pop businesses.
Yeah, the vertically integrated dispensary grow that you were talking about.
A lot of them are, yeah. That's the best business model to have, because essentially you can use data to track every single item to sell, and even when you're wholesaling, tracking to see what sells out best where, and then you can figure out your cultivation on, we need to grow more of this. If we know that Secret Cookies grows better and sells through all the time over like our worst selling, this one sits on the shelf, we're not going to grow that. We're going to grow the stuff that sells through all the time.
Right.
And we're going to grow as much of that, and we're going to blow that out until that goes down the line, and then we'll switch it up and we'll find something new that people want that sells through.
What's really fascinating is that what you're describing is basically the model that a small farm has used for centuries. A small farm is a vertically integrated business. Yeah,
In Canada, they call it farm to gate, and I've always found that fascinating, because in the cannabis tourism space, there's a doctor, a PhD, Dr. Susan Dupege out of I think it's Ontario. I'm not really sure what part of Canada she's at. She's from the University of Guelph.
That's Ontario. Yeah,
that's Ontario. So Dr. Susan Dupege is a good colleague and friend of mine. And in Canada, it's kind of an interesting thing. This model of farm to gate was built right into the process because, like Bill is saying, this has been the way farms have done business for ages, right? For centuries. So this model of being able to tour the farm, sell the weed directly to the consumer at the farm gate or at the farm is kind of an inherent, innate principle of cannabis, regulations in Canada. And I think it should be, and at least for my business and for my interests and the interests of my clients whom I take on cannabis tours, it would be hecka nice to have them be able to see the plant, meet the people, and then buy the plant from the people. And I think that would be the perfect.
Absolutely. Meet the bird who laid the egg.
Yeah. And that, look at that, also connects the business with the farmer and their practice, and it gives brand visibility and transparency as well. So people can look in there and see what's going on themselves.
It draws a huge connection to the plant for people. You know, it's one of those things like the purpose of my being is to show people into this world of cannabis.
Beautiful.
It's to pull back the green curtain on this clandestine world that for so long has been hidden from the general populace by design. And so for me, having them complete the experience of seeing the plant and engaging with the plant and coming closer to the plant, and then subsequently purchasing that plant from the farmer and consuming that plant, that is the full circle, my friends. That is the complete, that is it. And that's what we're trying to get to here. But unfortunately, due to bureaucracy and bullshit, here we are. We can't sell a dime of weed off of the farm.
And so
nobody can regulate that or bureaucratize it. It's an organic process, and bureaucracy really has no place in that process. So they have to make jobs for themselves.
Yep.
And so the idea out here is to try to keep it with that vertical model where you can do that. If you wanted to, like us in Broken Bow, wouldn't it be great if you could come tour the farm, go pick up your package of like your edibles, your concentrates, your flower, and then already have your cabin rented with a cannabis friendly cabin, and go to the cabin with your products. It's cannabis. It has all the things that you would need to smoke and all that. And then you have, the guide tours that are hooked up to that. If you guys want to go boating or fishing, or you're going to go jet skiing, but that's why I'm at where I'm at, because when we get these laws implemented that we're pushing and we get recreation, like the possibilities for agrotourism for cannabis it's so big, right? And we can feature farmers, we can feature these products. And then with the future that we have with technology and AI and data collection, we can maximize all of our profit models for our inputs, for our outputs, and the whole 9 yards.
And on a micro scale, what you're talking about, Brandon, about basically, so the agrotourism portion of it, this is something I've been clamoring at for a long time, and not just because it's my business, but because I truly believe that there is a large portion of sales within the cannabis industry in California specifically. I feel that we are losing a large portion of sales to the traditional market in the legal market, because folks have not embraced the agrotourism model. They've not embraced it the way the wine industry's embraced it. They've not embraced it. And Todd's got this cute smirk on his face. I want to hear what
you want to know what just happened. I'll be honest. You know what just happened? I smoked the NL5, the same one that you smoked, right? And I fucking not even this far into the joint. I just said I said, man, wow, it just gets you really high really fast. And it happened to Victor the other night. I rolled him a joint. He was sitting at this desk and he got
I was giggling like a child. I felt like I got high for the first time again off that. It was fun.
Just a joint too. No hash or nothing.
No, it was fun. And it was fun because, to digress from what we were talking about for a second, just to talk about weed again. Right. But the NL5 that I smoked, I was really surprised by the potency of one of the primary colors of weed, if you will. A lot of times we think of the hybridization that's really bringing out the good traits and the benefits. But I mean, the NL5 was, what a good smoke, Todd. That was fantastic.
Can I say this out loud? You know what? Human beings have been cultivating cannabis for its potency for literally thousands of years. And I think that it's really obnoxious that growers come along and think that they've improved cannabis radically in the last 40 or 50 years of cannabis prohibition, when in reality, totally amazing cannabis has been floating around the planet for a god long time. And, these are original varieties, original haze, original skunk, Northern Lights. They are potent. They are, in my opinion, sometimes more potent than a lot of the more modern varieties that smell and look and taste good, but don't really get you that high.
Todd, what's your Americans have a cultural tendency to think that we're the first to think of anything, and that we're the center of everything, and that nothing important is happening anywhere else, or has happened anywhere else. We don't learn from history or from other people's discoveries, and that's one of the things that's holding us back. There's an awful lot out there that is known, has been known for a long time about cannabis in particular, but plants in general, that nobody in this generation of cannabis growers seems to be looking at with any great interest, and I think that's a shame. I'm trying to write about some stuff like that. I did it for you, and it's something that I just want to urge folks like everybody who's interested in the issue of quality cannabis to start looking at some of the stuff that was done in India and Persia and even the UK in the 1800s. There's a lot to learn, and everything you're talking about is absolutely true. People have been understanding that it isn't the amount of THC that's the potency. It's the potency, whatever potency is. I don't know what it is. Do you? I mean,
Well, I mean, if you do dabs of 99.98%
well, yeah,
THCA,
it'll knock you out, sure.
you get high. But the one thing I realized when I started
Different.
getting these diamonds is that it wasn't the only conversation. And when you go back to what Dr. Lester Grinspoon used to try to emphasize, that it's not an entourage effect. The definition of entourage is a celebrity surrounded by a group of people. That's his entourage. An ensemble is a group of molecules working together in harmony, or synergistically, which
Good
is
point.
cannabis.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Good.
realistically, it's an ensemble effect. And when, he used to always joke that one tuba does not make a symphony.
Right.
It takes all of the instruments, and
Right.
and this makes a lot more sense. And when you start looking at cannabis as a whole, and you start taking into consideration the cannabinoids in their melodies, and then on top of that the terpenes, and now we're even looking at things like thiols, and you put all of that in combination, that's the wonder of cannabis. And a
That's
lot of people miss that conversation entirely when they're looking at THC levels and not much else. And one of the things that was interesting is when Mel Frank started getting varietals tested, he had a favorite that he just loved. It made him feel good, made him happy. When he got it tested, he said it was like 7% THC, and he was dumbfounded because he had stuff testing in the 20s. So why wasn't the stuff in the 20s what he really was vibing?
Right.
Why was it this 7% stuff? Because
Yeah.
up to the point of getting it tested, if you had asked him which was more potent, he would have went, this one gets me really high, this one not as high. And realistically, it's opposite. So it goes to show this incredibly important role that terpenes and the other molecules are playing in cannabis. And this is also why I think that cannabis has been just as potent as it's ever been for a very, 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 very long time.
I'm with that statement. I think that, the same principle behind the miracle lottery ticket and a series of seeds can pull the best strain in the world, and could have done it 30 years ago. You can do it today. I think these genetics have been around forever. You're right, Todd.
I
Well,
think
to a
this also
degree.
points to a lot of opportunities that are barely folks like you guys are beginning to identify, and business people are going to, small business, I hope small farmers are going to be able to start growing on this maybe farm to table kind of model or farm to gate model, growing with this kind of refinement. Over here in this field we have this, then over here in a small corner we have this, and then walk around and experience the plants, try them out. I think it offers more than just getting high.
Right.
I completely agree with you. I think the conversation is a lot larger than a lot of people realize. And realistically, I think post harvest handling really is what causes cannabis to be excellent by the time you get it, or shitty by the time you get it. And if it hasn't been handled correctly and it's dry and it's lost its luster, even if it was grown with all the love and organic materials in the world, it gets destroyed And unfortunately, quite easily, when somebody who doesn't understand what they're doing gets that bag, leaves it open for a couple hours in a dry environment,
Yep.
closes it back up, realizes it's dry, puts something in it to rehumidify it, ruins it even more, and carries it on to the end person. So, to me, as a cultivator who cultivates his own cannabis, it's all about that post-harvest handling that
Yep.
I think is so important, because I don't want to lose those subtle aromas and those subtle tastes. And now I know that plays such an important role to the overwhelming effect of the cannabis.
You're right, Todd. And a wise man once said to me, the minute you cut that plant down, it's yours to ruin.
You're absolutely right. And that's the reason that there's a specific role in the wine industry for the winemaker. Somebody who takes the grapes and then shepherds them through the whole process with an objective in mind. And a knowledge of the chemistry, and a knowledge of grape, and a knowledge of it. And they sometimes hit it and they sometimes don't. And so you get a great Chateau year, and then you get a shitty Chateau year.
You look at these vintners who, it's kind of a wild science, right? Because, part of my weed and wine tour, we take a tour of Roederer Estate, and they're French. They're champagne makers in the French style, right? Like they came to Anderson Valley to grow wine, grow weed, wine grapes, and make wine in the champagne style. And when you talk to their vintners and their winemakers, they can smell the cuvee. They could smell the harvest in the field where all the wine grapes are,
right.
And they can tell what that will produce in the bottle 10 years down the road. So knowing that correlational, that science between what's on the field and what's in the bottle or what's in your joint, and knowing kind of how that relationship happens and develops over time, that is the true science in growing weed, I think. Like that
and
is
art, and the art and the science.
Yeah.
So winemaking's an art as well as science.
With the method that I approach is I looked at the rest of agriculture. What do they do for the rest of agriculture? Whether it's corn or soy or wheat, tomatoes, peppers, even ornamental horticulture flowers. They all use agronomists, and an agronomist will look at the soil, and he'll look at the type of soil, and then he'll make a recommendation on what needs to be done to that soil to bring that soil up to the proper nutritional level for that crop. And those targets are already, most of these things have already been figured out. If there's a crop that could have been made money off of, some scientists somewhere did the measuring and the testing to see what the leaf tissue should look like, and to see what the soil nutritional levels should look like, and to see what a sap analysis should look like. And so it just made sense for me to take that same approach for cannabis, where you do the same thing. You just do the analytics, because it's really inexpensive to get soil testing done, to get leaf tissue analysis done. And so if you eliminates the guesswork out of cultivating. So whether you need to, till organic amendments and compost and amendments into an agronomic soil outdoors, you could do the same thing, and you can, take a different approach, but similar methods for like peat-based modified growing mixes, or like living soil. You can take the same approach with taking soil analysis, saturated paste, and tissue, and just making sure that you have X amount. Like for what I do is I know, according to the data, if I need calcium, I'll use something like gypsum. And I'll know exactly how much gypsum I need to add per yard of soil, or I could do pounds per acre if we're doing large quantities.
Sure.
And you do the same thing. It makes it really cost effective, because then you just buy bulk dry amendments that are really, really inexpensive. When you go and buy a pallet of different amendments, 50-pound things of Epsom salt, 50 pounds of gypsum, and iron sulfate, and potassium, and soy meal, and
cottonseed meal,
things like that, chicken manure, stuff like that, you can exponentially drop your costs. I mean, I did an analysis at a facility that had about 400 lights the other day, and and if they were to, retrofit the system, outfit things to LEDs, and use soil with the agronomy, they would essentially be cultivating on their input costs from $8.59 to $12.79 per pound, and that would include the testing, plus the analytics, plus the fertilizer, plus the microbes, plus the actual mineral top dress inputs for the run.
Yeah.
So it's super, super cost effective when you actually look at it from a data perspective, and you're not guessing. And a lot of people, like in my space in organics, they like to do like compost teas, like for indoor and stuff like that. And it's like, man, that's for me, that's a lot of guesswork, and it seems like a lot of extra labor when you can just know exactly what you need, top dress at the beginning, do another test for flour just to make small adjustments, and then just use what data is already available. It takes the guesswork out of the cultivation side and decreases your
Brandon,
cost.
I think I did know you in another life, because when I wrote Cultivator's Handbook, I'd grown cannabis a little bit, and I knew a little bit, but I didn't have any real sort of grasp of it. And I went to all the USD, Oregon, University of Oregon, Oregon State, were both USDA repositories, and they had all the literature all the way from 1900 up to present, which was late 60s. And I just went through and I pulled out all of the relevant data on hemp and cannabis, put it together with what I knew, got a really great street artist to illustrate it, and just wrote a very simple, how to do it and I knew it was how to do it because it had been done 1,000 times and the USDA had published it. You know, so it's a great repository. It's brilliant that you just zeroed in on that and are using it. That's great.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny to that? When I was in prison, I was getting copies of The Emperor Wears No Clothes and passing them around. And the special investigative services inside the prison didn't particularly like it. So he read the book, actually, and he called me up to his office and he said, "You're going to like this." He says, "You're not going to like this, but you're going to like this." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I finally found a reason to prohibit The Emperor Wears No Clothes from federal prisons, and you're going to love to know why." And I was like, "There's no information on cultivation." And he says, "Oh, but there is. If you turn to this piece where you reprinted the United States Department of Agriculture talking about the cultivation of hemp, that's the cultivation information that I'm using to ban this book from federal prisons with." And I figured you'd like that. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
Now to the hole, McCormick, to the hole.
I was like,
Oh,
wow. No, he was okay. He didn't send me the hole for hemp, but when I got to another prison, I actually went to the hole for 30 days for having letters that were written to me on paper that at the bottom said hemp recycled blend US milled. And they said, "What are you doing with this in prison? You can't have any hemp," and put me in the hole for 30 days. Shit you not.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't worry.
The
Strengthens your
rehabilitative
character.
processes of the American justice system. There we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
I have a question. I have a question for the group.
I have a question for Brandon too.
What's everybody smoking right now? I need to know. What's everybody smoking?
So one of my business partner, he has a farm. We have another farm together, but I'm smoking on some organic Carter Creek cannabis. We're out here in southeast Oklahoma, and I'm smoking on some peanut butter cookies.
Woo! I like the peanut butters. They're very nice.
I like it because it's not too, it's a little mellow but not too heavy, and I'm not I don't like to smoke stuff that's too heavy unless I'm like gonna go night
right,
because I want to be pretty alert and active. And I really like, my favorite really though is real heady stuff that's almost like more psychedelic, you know.
Right. So you're saying drugs? Anyway, I'm smoking on some very limonene heavy rosin right now. Some live rosin. It looks all greasy and yummy. And let me see if I get a good focus in on it.
Yeah,
there you go.
Nice. Oh yeah, sparkles there. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks juicy.
I think there's
very juicy. It's got a very limonene smell. It's almost hints a little bit of that almost a gassy smell at the end there. But yeah, it's a very nice Bird extracts. Thank you, Bird, for purveying some of the finest extracts I've had in a long time. So thank you, buddy. And Bill, what are you puffing on these days, bud?
Well, I wish I could show it to you, but it's across the room. Got a couple of buds of Durban poison that a friend gave me.
So
Actually,
can I
my
tell you
wife and I
something
both
funny,
like
Victor?
What's that?
Bill wrote a way to phonetically teach people how to say the names of the terpenes, and we both laughed when we heard you say, "Is it lemonini?"
Lemonine.
Lemonini.
I didn't say that, did
No, he
I?
didn't. No, he didn't. He said limonene.
I said limonene.
Limonene. That's
Limonini.
right.
Yeah, you put a little "ini" to it. I
Well,
was just laughing. It's the
All
weed.
right. All right.
But I had a question for Brandon, and it was, Brandon, you're one of the few people that are actually talking about cost of production and looking at it really closely. And I was wondering if you would, give me what your estimates for an indoor, outdoor, and an outdoor greenhouse and indoor pound are at the end of cultivation.
Okay, well, there's a couple of different factors. My specialty really is because with the Earthworks Agriculture, which is my consulting services, depending on whether we're starting from the beginning or we're retrofitting something or doing pre-existing, what I'll do is, I do bulk manufacturing of soil that's already been blended. We test everything for heavy metals. The actual input that's go into it, we test, and then I test the soil afterwards. And it's blended to meet the target nutritional levels for the crop, for the cannabis crop. I've tested every other soil on the market, and most of them don't even come close. A lot of them are like, some of them you would be shocked at the nutritional profile or the lack thereof.
Are you saying they're not matching what they're labeling, or are they just not like? What are you seeing in that testing?
Well, in a lot of cases, I don't think that the manufacturers understand blend specific mixing for, because they're not agronomists, unless they are an agronomist and they own a mixing facility and that's what they specialize in. But I don't know a whole lot of people that are doing that, right? And so there are some companies that are getting pretty close. But as far as all of the data that I've collected, and I've collected a shitload of data because I have a lot of different people that I work with, and everybody collectively uses the exact same program when it comes to nutrient input and the data collection side. And so, but what I do is you have to look at your ROI. So when you get soil, it's a little more up front as opposed to hydroponic media like cocoa or rock wool. However, the larger you scale, the larger it's going to cost you to throw out and buy more of that media. So for longevity, buying soil, you have a better ROI, which is your return on your investment, because you're not throwing it out. So it decreases your cost over a period of time. So you have to look at that. Versus just, how much is this going to cost, right? Because when I go into a place, I'm not telling people that this is going to be cheap to convert or anything. I'm going to say, look, this is going to cost money, but this is why you want to spend the money up front, is because if you want longevity out of this system and you plan to be in business for a long period of times, and you have stock market cannabis where things are going highs and lows and highs and lows, you need to be able to cut your costs, operating costs, your labor.
Control your costs, yeah.
Yeah, and so I look at that, and then I look at, based on the volume of soil that a facility has, I can estimate the amount of water usage. Once I have the amount of water usage, I can estimate the amount of liquid smart carbon, which is, the carbon-based fertilizer. So this actually acts as a catalyst. It acts to bring organic matter and it's chelated minerals in the form that they're available. So like when we're talking in agronomic terms and like the types of mineral inputs that are actually available, plants only use some low weight organic carbon compounds. The other things are going to be in their inorganic, ionic form. Like calcium has to be in its divalent form. Magnesium has to be in its divalent form. That's why you see it drawn out as Ca2+. That's its divalent form. If we're talking about potassium, it's potassium hydroxide, or KO2. If we're talking about phosphorus, the only available form is H2PO4, right? Which is sulfate, right? Or sulfuric acid, right? And so what they're able to do with this carboxylic acid is it's able to naturally chelate all of the elements in the form that's available, and then it's organic, so it has a higher nutrient use efficiency, 96% over maybe like 10 to 15% with a chemical fertilizer. So it actually works more effectively than a chemical fertilizer, but it doesn't have the detrimental effects phosphoric acid. Thank you for the correction.
I have a question, Brandon. I have a question for you. Do you find in organic farming that it's necessary to test test what's flowing out of your pots?
There's no runoff.
There's no
you
runoff.
You don't want runoff, because if you're using runoff, you're moving nutrients out of that system, and those nutrients are vital, especially if you're trying to keep things in balance from a data perspective. Like if you were running stuff off, the only reason I would be running stuff off is because the data says there's too much sodium, or there's too much chloride, or there's too much bicarbonate built up, or there's some issue where another mineral nutrient that is way too high needs to be flushed out of that system, in which case you would do your flush, you would test again, and then you would have to re-amend a lot of the stuff that was flushed out with what you're trying to rinse.
Gotcha.
Right?
I appreciate that clarification. Personally, I long time listener, first time caller. So thank you for that information.
Yeah.
Well,
and then
proper leaching is actually with a pH balance and a mild nutrient solution, because you don't want to strip it all away. And I think a lot of people don't really understand flushing and leaching, really. I don't even like using the term flushing, because I think that it's misappropriate. I used to always joke that, flushing's for toilets, leaching is for plants, and it's only due when you need to do it.
Yeah. And one of the things about the smart carbon is none of these things are in like a sulfate form or in a mineral form where they're actually going to react in the presence of hydrogen when there's hydrogen in water, right? Or react with any of the other chemical nutrients that are already in the soil. It stays chelated to the carbon, so it doesn't run off with the solution. And because it's carbon, it stimulates the biology. So the biology will create new soils. It'll create new, more complex carbon compounds, and also some of those carbon compounds are those low weight organic molecules that I mentioned earlier that the plant can sequester, things like phytohormones, things like auxin, gibberellic acid, and some of these other things that are going to actually have biostimulating effect on the plant.
So, Brandon, it sounds like you've probably studied the role of fungi and bacteria in acid chelation of soil minerals. Is that?
Yeah.
And the health of the soil biome. You want to talk about that?
And that's why I promote this product, is because it's able to stimulate the biology and create a healthy biome. Because when we're talking about what's organic or organic matter in soil, we're talking about carbon. Because when they're mentioning that, someone's idea of organic might be like different than the definition when it comes to science and chemistry, because organic means carbon based. Right. And the reason why we're talking about carbon is because carbon is energy. If you look at what fuels our car, it's a hydrocarbon compound. When those chemicals are released through combustion, it provides energy. And it's the same within these soil systems. These soil systems need energy too, and that energy that stimulates in the growth and proliferation of new microbes and new compounds in soil, and the sequestration of atmospheric carbon into organic carbon, or sequester atmospheric nitrogen and turn it into ammonia. These things need energy, these things to take place, and these things take place through carbon that's available in the soil. So we're addressing carbon as a nutrient when we're using something like this carbon-based fertilizer, and then when I'm addressing specific microbe consortiums, what we're doing is we're talking about what the metabolites of those species are. You were talking about the biomes that chelate. I have a vial right here. This is trichoderma, and this has stadiophores, which chelate iron. And iron, if you know anything about iron, it oxidizes super easy, and so it becomes highly unavailable in these systems where our plants are operating in this pH range that's not conducive for iron to stay in its available form, and it's not conducive because of how much water we're using. But if you use something like a biological agent that can keep, yeah, it sequesters it and keeps it. And then when this thing cycles and dies out, if it's moving and it's around the root zone, it's providing that mineral nutrient to the rhizosphere. And so we're looking at crop steering biologically.
It's a great circle, isn't it? It's a beautiful circle. You're describing the elements of it beautifully.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Brandon, you know so much about kind of this tweaking of organics, right? Like tweaking the organic elements that kind of go into feeding your plant. I think this is fantastic. I mean, have you gotten any of this down on paper?
Yeah, actually. So right now it was really difficult, but I figured out the math in the algorithms for some of the nutrient cycling capacities at different temperatures and the rate of ppm of certain minerals like soy meal or bone meal, and what the time period and release of what minerals would be released. And we're able to make an algorithm. And so I'm going to be releasing what's called a nutrient calculator. And so if you go and test your soil, I exclusively use Logan Labs for everything. You know, that's how I operate, because I don't want things shifting. Everything has to be the same, because those numbers are just numbers floating in space unless you have comparative and analytics to them, right? And so I use the same lab. If you send in your soil sample and you get a soil analysis and a saturated paste test, and then you put all of that info in the column, it'll print you out a graph and a piece of paper that says you need to add X amount of gypsum per yard of soil. You need to add X amount of wollastonite to adjust your pH per yard of soil. Or if you're doing acres, we'll have a different type of calculator that'll calculate things on a larger scale. And we can actually change the variables for not just cannabis, but any crop. So the idea is to prove it out in cannabis, make sure it works with all the people that I'm already working with, change the parameters for other crops, license, and then patent the IP, license it out to one of the big ag players, so that way they can have these really inexpensive, things that you can go on your phone and be like, oh, here's my data, and then this is what I need to add to my soil.
I'm sure you're familiar with the National Science Foundation Small Business Innovation Research Program, where they this sounds like and I know it's federal, but the application is so widespread. I'll send you, if you like, I'll send you a link to it. I'm writing a grant for another person on it right now.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do with data. And here's the thing. When it comes to cannabis and agriculture is looking at cannabis because people are willing to spend more money on research and advancing technology that is kind of almost specific to cannabis that they wouldn't do in other crops because it's not profitable enough, right? And so a lot of these technological advancements that are happening in agriculture are coming from the cannabis space. So it makes sense to build out the most cost-effective business model based off data analytics, based off of like the hydro guys. They're monitoring in real time their VPD, which is their RH, their temperatures, their hydrology, their EC. If you have ion-specific probes that are in soil and you can see how much nitrogen in real time is there, how much calcium or magnesium, that's where the future is headed. And it's gonna, if you can make the technology inexpensive, you can apply these to mainstream agriculture, and there's a lot more money in mainstream agriculture than there is just in cannabis, because it's that and pharmaceuticals, those are two largest businesses in the world. And so if you can create more cost-effective, better methods for nutrient delivery, and you can create better systems, and then what happens is those systems, you prove those systems, and then you license them out, or you partner with one of the guys, and then you implement that change from the inside, right? And to change those systems, because a lot of people will talk shit about like big ag and stuff like that. And I think I've mentioned this before. I think me and Todd were talking about this. You can't just inherently have a system completely destroyed that billions of people are dependent on, because it would be absolute chaos. The idea is to go in and try to change the system. Do a small business, have a small business, prove out the concepts, make sure that it functions and works well, and then let that thing grow, promote it, and figure out what's the best way to educate.
your technology sounds like it's going to empower small producers in the third world where this food crisis is hitting right now, and where the
Well,
cost of soil
Yeah.
supplements and fertilizers is unaffordable.
Yeah.
And all
Well,
those
okay. So this
overall,
fertilizer,
this is going to overall lower the cost of cannabis, improve more accessibility to people for higher quality cannabis at a lower cost, which I think is really the whole point of it. Really,
Yeah.
it's accessibility.
And sustainability. That's the
Yeah.
key word here too.
So this is made out of lignite. So there's tons of just
okay.
deposits. There's tons of deposits. What lignite is, it's
Yeah.
organic matter that got compressed into the earth at a certain pH and temperature for millions of years. So it's literally like tree canopies and stuff that got basically solidified into organic matter. Yeah, it's lignite. It's like almost looks like coal, but it's not coal.
Right.
And it's just everywhere. So the fertilizer is actually made of that because it contains all of those mineral elements that were in those organic matter. So we have, and not only that, but when it's reacted, we can add any other mineral to it to increase its efficacy, and then it can be custom blended. But the real thing is that, you know, with the way that we currently cultivate with subsidized farming and the way that we have vertically integrated cannabis, I think that those farming systems will kind of look similar to cannabis, where we do have more what you guys call farm to gate or farm to table farming systems. It's just a matter of being able to implement systems that are cost affordable. You know,
they'll allow a small business to operate profitably.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
And Brandon, can you talk a little bit about how all this kind of plays in with the, you know, like just a general sustainability model for a business, sustainability for the earth? Like, tell me a little bit about how what you're doing.
Okay, so
helping, you know, because you're helping weed get better, you're helping ag get better. How are we saving the world here? Yeah.
So there's two different types of modes of thought when it comes to organic agriculture, right? There's regenerative agriculture, which is like you own the land that you're on and you're making the most out of what you have there. You can make your own inputs, what people would call natural farming, right? Collecting things like IMOs, doing minimal inputs. Now it's really, really difficult to scale that out super, super huge. Like if you're doing tens of thousands of hectares of crops that literally feed like huge portions of people, we can change the farming practice. But if we change the way that we even just fertigate, right? Like instead of using chemical fertilizer, what that does is it actually depletes the carbon in the soil and it turns it into atmospheric carbon through the carbon cycle because it acidifies the organic matter that's in there. Now, if you're adding organic matter to the system itself, and then you do something like green waste recycling alongside, so changing your practices slightly, you can fertigate the same, you'll fertigate less. And I'll give you a good example.
Can I hold you on 1 second with the example? Bill has to go at 11 o'clock. And I just wanted to say thank you to Bill for joining us for our conversation today.
I wanted to say thank you, Todd, for having me, and Brandon and Victor. It's a real pleasure listening to your wonderful thoughts and ideas, and I hope to stay in touch somehow. And Brandon, I'll be sending you some information on national science. And Victor, I'd love to talk to you about terpene bathing.
Yes.
Well, I think we'll be doing this again next week, and we'll continue the conversation for sure. And you're always welcome to be on, Bill. You've been
thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
One of the people I've always looked up to since I started looking into cannabis cultivation and collecting books. And I thank you for being one of the first.
And you guys are the future, and I appreciate being able to be included. Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon, and we'll probably see you next week.
You will.
Cannabis, if you'll join us.
Yeah, you can get my information from Todd.
I'll send it over.
I'll do that, Brandon.
Bill's currently writing for Grow Magazine, everybody that's watching, and you can read more of his writings at Panacea Chronicles. And also he's been writing with my website, Authentic Genetics, and we've been putting some cultivation and cannabinoid and terpene information on as well. And Brandon, if you'd like to continue, I was really interested in what you were saying.
Yeah, so when it comes to large agriculture, you know, we still have to support a large population. And so it's kind of almost infeasible to just be like, oh, we need to get rid of big ag. Like it's not feasible to do so. We have a huge population of people. And so the idea is to change it. And I was going to give you an example with the smart carbon, right? You're going to fertigate for a short cycle, maybe 4 times throughout the cycle. And then on a longer cycle, maybe 10 weeks or longer, you're going to fertigate 6 times the cycle. So you're not having to input a whole lot. It's almost just replacing like what someone would do with a compost tea, but it delivers all of the macro and micronutrients right there, so it helps it just give it a boost for the yield part. And from the carbon standpoint, it acts as that biostimulant to really help, proliferate the biology that's in there. And then it also chelates because it has 20% extra of that pure those pure carboxylic acids that's in this. And so when they put that into the soil system, it's going to help chelate the elements that are there, making those more bioavailable. So if you add this and you're fertigating, it's liquid, so it can be fertigated very easily at scale through the same methods that are already used in industrial agriculture. And then all you have to do is change up some of your practices, like doing multiple species of cropping, and then also doing crop cover, where you plant in crop covers and then you till that right back into the soil. You let it die back into the soil, so you help build up organic matter like that. Right. And then also, instead of just like in so many ag settings, instead of just stripping the land completely bare, you can go and take all the product and then take all of the waste, the green waste, and you can digest it in a digester and do a solid state fermentation using a microbial consortium. And that will turn that into biofertilizers. And what that'll do is that'll take all of that organic carbon that's in that material and all that mineral nutrition. It'll build up biology with the fermentation process, and then you'll deliver that back into the land. And so the idea is to take the testing before and after and see if you're becoming carbon positive. If you're building up organic matter this way, then you're creating a carbon positive farming system.
Are you a fan of using products like the DEM products, the Dragonfly Earth Medicine, starters for your teas, compost teas, or how do you usually start a compost tea?
So I don't do compost teas, and the reasons why is because I can just do water. If I already know what my soil, how it's falling into solution, because this is the way it works. So, you have 2 different variables when it comes to the lab analytics for soil, and one is looking at the overall profile of what's in the soil, and then 2 is the saturated paste, which is what is in the soil as it falls into solution in a metabolically available form to the plant. So that's almost kind of like your nutrient solution if you were growing in hydro. And then it tells you exactly what the ppms of each of those minerals are in solution. So I know how much Ca2 plus I have, I know how much phosphate I have, I know how much KO2 I have, and I know the ppms as it falls into solution. And so for me to go and brew teas, it just kind of more work. And it's like, I would have to do a bunch of like more analytics. I'd have to sit down and say, okay, I want to add in this much nitrogen and this percent for this volume of soil. So this is how much I would need. For me, it's just a little more work. And as you scale, you need to be able to cut costs. So I'm not saying that it's really great, like compost teas and adding organic matter at scale, especially for agronomic soils that have poor organic matter, poor biology in their soils. But when it comes to like indoor, especially with what I do with these soils that are peat based, that are already built, man, biology in those things are already
living and kicking.
Yeah, living and kicking. And I like to kind of do what's called biological crop steering, which is, we'll have certain microbial consortiums that we can't even test for. 99% are untestable, really, because they feed off of root exudates and these low weight organic carbon compounds as their food and energy source. And so we can't replicate that in the lab. However, just that 1% of certain things like Bacillus subtilis and Trichoderma, for instance, they work to suppress pathogens in soil, making iron available and do some other things, And so if I'm looking to do something specifically that's based off of something that happens in nature, like nutrient cycling of nitrogen or nutrient cycling of phosphorus or nutrient cycling of carbon, I want to try to address that from a biological standpoint. I'm going to inoculate my soil with a microbe that has been scientifically shown to have the highest affinity for the ability to do whatever it is, whether it's sequester nitrogen, solubilize phosphorus, take atmospheric carbon and turn it into organic carbon in the soil. And so there's microbes for that. And so I'm looking directly at that and the ability to cycle nutrients, out-compete pathogens. We know what those consortiums are. And a lot of those are already naturally found in the soil systems. And all we're doing is figuring out a way to proliferate those at a really high rate and then inoculate the soil system, because you do get a reaction. It's going to be an immediate reaction, and as time goes by, they'll degrade as they kind of use the food up that they're using.
But you're basically catalyzing. You're giving the soil's the precursor to the catalyst that is the inoculation, and then subsequently it does what you want it to do in the soil. So that's you know what you've proven to me, Brandon? You've proven to me again that putting people in jail for weed is ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah.
You're a fucking genius.
2 terms, man. I did 2 terms.
No, you're brilliant. And again, it's this stuff all needs to get out there, because again, you're on the edge, right? You're on the bleeding edge, if you will, of where we're headed with agriculture, big ag, and it starts really with guys like you understanding, these inputs. And I'm
going to tell you something that my lawyer told me, right? He said right now, all the big players, they're investing in energy, water, and agriculture. And there's a reason. It's because when there's a need, that's when people start to actually like, oh, hey, maybe this will be profitable. The science and stuff doesn't really come out unless someone's willing to just, one, do the work and like push it, or like the big players don't make it mainstream until they can make a profitable business model out of it. And that's just how economics and capitalism works, and you can love it or hate it, but that's just the truth of it.
Well, at the end of the day, that's also going to be what changes the face of cannabis cultivation, because a lot of why people were so motivated to home grow and risk it is because the profit margins were huge. And in regular agriculture, the profit margins are minimal. And that's what is going to happen with cannabis. And I look forward to that day coming, because I believe that cannabis will make the world a better place, and accessibility is the key to that happening. So if people can really afford it, which is really what my question was initially, is what do you think is a realistic target price for cost of production on a pound of outdoor, a pound of indoor, and a pound of greenhouse?
Yeah. So if we're looking at that price point for just the nutrients alone, and let's say we're at the high end, which is $12.79. So there's your pound of input. Then we need to look at integrated pest management, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's your IPM?
I love how you're going to break it down. The cost of nutrients, the cost of IPM, and the cost of production. This is brilliant,
right?
Get your spreadsheets out, folks.
Yeah, you have to
learn something.
You have to spreadsheet. Okay, so what's your labor? And your labor is going to include things like your trimming, your pruners. So I always recommend to my people, cross-train people. That way you can have your trimmers, transplant, prune, all this other stuff. You might even be able to get full-time employees out of that, because for the most part, you can have automated systems and that are just going. But when day 21 comes around and you need to start pruning, or day 42 comes around and you need to start pruning, you need help real fast. You need a lot of people. You don't want to have 10 people full-time that are sitting around doing nothing. Right.
When you said full plant employees, it was a term I had not heard before, and it's perfect, Brandon. It is full.
So Brandon, I got the notebook. So you're saying $12, 12. I'm writing this all down because I want a total number on this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, $12.79. Let's say that for this particular facility.
Okay.
Then you have to look at your IPM. I didn't do the IPM costs because that is not something that can be generated based off of soil and water volume, right? I can do my fertigation and testing based off of how much soil is in a facility, but it really depends on, measuring out what an entire run with the products looks like, and then we can create that variable. But you have integrated pest management, you have your labor, you have your inputs for the farm, right? For the production, nutrients, microbes, that stuff. You also have your electricity. You also have your, if you have a mortgage or a rent
Rent.
or rent. I always tell people, if you're spending a ton of money if you're starting out, try to buy the place
Yeah.
if it's feasible, because then you're gonna, any improvements that you do on the building are gonna be profitable for
Or
your
deduction for the improvement. Yeah.
yeah. So you need to look at your rent, your electricity, your inputs, integrated pest management, your labor. You're gonna have to look at your commission on your sales. You have to remember that. Labor is also you're going to have to look at how much it's going to cost to trim. And then, if you're using medium, you're going to have to look at the cost of, what it costs you to replace your media if you're hydro. Also, you're going to look at the cost of water. With the systems of water, if you're doing hydro, that's going to be a lot more expensive than doing hydro. So water costs, which is a lot smaller than these ones, but these are your main ones. Labor's the most expensive, followed by electricity, usually, if they're not using LEDs, followed by nutrient, followed by IPM, typically is what I see. When I see budgets, a lot of times people aren't spending enough money on marketing and they're overspending on other areas.
Yeah. That's really good advice too, because people don't recognize that marketing is such an important part. You can grow all the weed you want, but if you got nowhere to
business. Even if you grow good weed, because I hear people all the time, "Oh, I'll just grow the best weed," and it's like, yeah, but a lot of people, even people that are new to this, can grow really good weed.
Yeah, and nowadays, marketing and packaging, for that matter, for as much as we want to deny it, it's a 1 + 1 = 3 game.
Look,
so
I'm not a fan of Mylar, and as soon as and we're looking into biodegradable options, but when it comes down to it, like, even the customers seem to be more drawn towards prepackaged solutions, and I think it's just because of this consumer mentality that's just built inherently into our system in America. And so what you have to do is you have to look at a business, whether you're a cannabis business or any other business, where you use social media and you use marketing, and that you have to build a brand presence, because the only thing that people know are the big guys. And those are the people that resonate with people, and you have to be able to figure out a resonate to get their attention.
Totally. And the other thing too is, like, what I've noticed, at least in my line of business now with tours and the tourism model, is that when I take guests to a dispensary, for example, that has like the products in a more tactile fashion, they're out, they can shop around for them, they can pick them up, they can touch the packaging in the boxes. Those dispensaries sell more weed. So you're right, the marketing game is really as important. Once the product is finished and in your hand, you grow the best weed in the world, but if you have nowhere to sell it to, and no marketing game with which to kind of improve the value on it, then you're just holding good weed. So and it's funny because I want to bring this back to Todd too, because not that I'm running the show. This is Todd
before you move on, one thing I do want to say: the true value of anything is what another person is willing to pay for it. That is the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of times in talking about marketing, and this is where I wanted to take it to Todd's business and authentic genetics. I think it's important to talk about his key operative, the operating term there is authentic, right? Authenticity, right? Authenticity is kind of the way I've marketed my business in the past and continue to market my business, and it's bred into all the products that I sell and all the tours and events that I host. Brandon, you're an authentic individual, dude. You are definitely ahead of the game and ahead of the curve in all things kind of nutrients, soil. Dude, I learned a lot from you today, dude, and I am blown away, absolutely blown away by all of your knowledge. Todd,
you're funny.
You're a fanboy. I love it.
Yeah. I think that actually cost of production is going to change this game entirely, and people who aren't paying attention to what it really costs to put out a pound of cannabis are going to get buried by the people who actually are paying attention to their math going forward, instead of basically building profit motives based on speculative prohibition and the profit margins. And I think it's all really going to change for the better when it
'Cause
becomes cheaper. But supermarkets and convenience stores are going to start carrying cannabis products just like
eventually,
they're carrying CBD products.
Yeah.
THC is going to, in my humble opinion, just like when CBD was removed from the Controlled Substances Act, and you started seeing CBD at liquor stores and gas stations across the country, that is going to happen with THC products quicker than shit. And the world's not going to melt down. It's actually going to become a better place. People will drink less, pop less pills, be more responsible, fucking enjoy the journey way more once they have access to good quality or any quality affordable cannabis and THC products. So I really, really believe in cannabis, and I think it's
That's
changed quicker than shit.
it is. And so when that happens, like I had to like this was always the biggest thing when I was growing back in San Diego. In 2014, I saw prices really start to drop, and I was like, dude, if I do not figure out what I'm going to do to decrease my cost, I'm going to have to go get a job. And I was like, and I do not want to go fucking get a job.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what? At the line, dude, I was using house and garden nutrients and I was using soil. So I had already switched from hydro. I was doing soil. But I started looking and reading the labels. Well, what's langbonite? Because I had a product that derived from langbonite. I look at langbonite, I'm like, holy shit, langbonite like costs like $20 for 50 pounds. And I paid like $60 for like a liter of this bottle or something like that, right? And it was like a potassium supplement. And I was like, this is fucking
incredibly
ludicrous.
wrong.
This is ludicrous. I was like, and then on the thing, it was like, maybe like 10% of that bottle was potassium. And so I was paying 90% water, and I was like, this is even more ludicrous. I was like, so I started looking at all the inputs, and then I was doing, testing recipes. I tested like the old Subcool recipe. I tested a bunch of different people's recipes, and then I tested Coot's recipe. And I just started playing around with different recipes, and I was doing it like that, and I had a good regimen figured out. But it wasn't until I moved to Oklahoma that I was in a commercial facility where I was like, look, I need to look at other industries to see how they constantly produce the same product over and over and over again. I was like, because I can't have variation, especially at scale. Like things need to be like, you can't have things like change. Like you need to have quality all the time. If your quality varies up and down, or you run out of product, or like you'll get replaced right away, especially in cannabis. They'll move on to the next brand because there's the next guy's waiting in line behind you, right, with his bag of weed to go, hey, I got this for this price. And so you lose your fucking turn if you don't have quality and consistency, right?
A regiment and a method, and dedicate yourself to the numbers and the data. No, dude, you're right. You're right. It's like,
also, you know what? The drying, the curing, the packaging, and the storage are probably more important than the growing in all reality, because it's not that hard to grow something really well. It's harder to cut it down without fucking it up and dry it properly, package it properly, and then sit on it long enough to put it into the hands of a consumer. And I think a lot of why they're going for the prepackaged stuff is because they're not necessarily going in there to buy an ounce of weed at today's ridiculous prices. In the future they will be, because why not? I mean, I look forward to the day where you could go in and get fresh cut flowers that haven't been dried at all, just like you can get sunflowers at the entrance of a supermarket.
They do that out here. They do that on Valentine's Day. So a lot of people put these bouquets together of fresh cannabis flowers, and it is a huge thing out here in Oklahoma. They sell
we need to be doing that.
Thousands, dude. They sell thousands of fresh bouquets on Valentine's Day out here. And you could do that on Mother's Day. You could do that, like on the big flower days.
Dude, every day should be fresh cannabis bouquet day.
So down here, because we're able to decrease the cost of cultivation, we're able to offer the patients directly out of the dispensary an ounce. 8/8 you can mix and match for $125.
Whoa.
And it's so fire, bro. I mean, this is what I'm smoking on.
No, hold on a second. $125 of indoor weed?
Dude, yes. And this is
the fuck
fire.
Out of here.
Yeah,
why
bro.
are we all in Oklahoma?
Look. I will go
kind of far from the ocean.
I will go get some more real quick. I will be right back so you guys can see.
Yeah, the prices are a lot better out there, and it's the way it should be, though. We are getting completely gassed with the price structure that's out here. In California, you have all these legacy farms and farmers that are really banking off the ignorance of the consumer to continue to spend money for a legal product, just like it was 1994 prohibition on a dead lot. And it's bullshit. And that
What is
really
the
has to
state
change.
making in all this? Brandon, can you talk a little bit? What is it? Just give me a little sense, real quick. What's the taxation model in Oklahoma that the state's taking on all this on that $125?
I think the tax is just the normal whatever tax is for the county that you're in, plus whatever the Oklahoma state tax is, and I think maybe they might have a really small excise tax, but it's
What
not
are those?
high.
Do you have any idea what those percentages
I
are?
think it might be 7%.
Which is less than sales tax in California. Boom.
Okay. Oh man, I don't know if you can see that very well.
I could see that. I could see that.
It's
This
great
is some,
weed.
dude. No, it's super good. It's if you looked on my IG, which is at rust.brandon, I feature some of the product on there, as long as it doesn't get flagged.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. I mean, I go down there and I help grow that. I do all the soil recs for this farm. We have another farm together, so this is essentially just like smoking my own stuff. I mean,
I think that's awesome.
I mean, look at these are nice, good nugs, dude. They smell great, and they're all organic too. So,
and this is why California is getting a run for its money in terms of every sort of weed that's going to Far East California from.
You just look if you overtax,
it's completely changed the whole world, bro.
It doesn't make sense what they did. They could have had a major boost in their overall economy. I mean, Oklahoma has grown exponentially since I've been out here.
But do you see any of this? Do you see
they were literally
plateauing? Like when can we expect Oklahoma to have their moment of like, oh God, we've got a lot of weed growing right now?
So this is there already is a lot of weed growing.
No, but I mean, when does it become when does it become detrimental? And do you see that happening?
Detrimental to the businesses?
Like Canada, like the LP's overproduced.
Yeah.
Oh, well, see, that's the thing. Most of it's mom and pop businesses and stuff like that. And so that's why I always tell people when I go into consults with them, dude, you got to do your marketing. You got to do your branding. Get a good pictures. Do this. Make media packs. Communicate. It's all about, there's a larger community out here. And the people that are in the community part are the people that are really successful. The people that are going to the events and going to the hash cups and going to the cups and participating in things like
I've seen a lot of those folks from Oklahoma that are business owners on my tour. They've come out to California and taken my tours. I've had native people take my tour from Oklahoma. Dude, everybody who's come out here from Oklahoma is just like ready to go, well financed. And again, when I say well financed, I mean there isn't much to finance, so they're like well financed. So
yeah, you don't have to spend $1 million to start a cannabis business out here or more. But that being said, there are some really, really big players out. There's some guys that have 100,000 or 200,000 fucking square feet or just massive acreage. But the problem is the same thing. You come back to large scale. Let's say you're using maybe like Athena and Power Side, right? And you can only run cultivars that actually run well in that nutrient regimen, as opposed to understanding nutritional. Because with what I do, you can take my soil testing and saturated paste to the next level, and you can do leaf tissue analysis and sap analysis to dial in specific cultivar nutrition. And I'm going to be doing that with a lot of the stuff that we hunt through. And actually, the NL number 2 is going to be in my next hunt with this new facility that we're putting up.
Amazing genetic. The NL2 has blown my mind. That's the one that had the really wide web leaves that were incredible. Some of the largest leaves I've ever seen in 30 years of growing were on those plants, the NL2s. It's supposedly just Afghan by Afghan by Afghan, so it's truly an interesting genetic.
Yeah. I talk to Greg pretty frequently. He calls me, and actually when I go out to Oahu on the 9th, he's going to fly over to the farm because I work with the largest. Cool. Yeah, I work with the largest farm in the state of Hawaii, and They grew from little hoop houses, 800 square foot hoop houses, to these huge, like they have 400,000 square feet of Dutch style greenhouses now.
Wow.
And they're able to do quality consistently just doing the ag data, just like any other ag industry would do. And so they were able to grow their patient base and be able to have consistent product. And Greg's going to go meet me out at one of the events. I'm going to go fly out to Hawaii on the 9th. Or on the 8th.
I hope you have a great event. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
That's great.
He's gonna go out.
Well, while you're talking about that, Brandon, the whole idea of vapor pressure deficit in the tropics seems like is coming to my mind. I'm like, that's a whole other ball game as you're talking about that humidity control in a greenhouse in Hawaii.
So here's the thing. So all of those things that could be pathogenic in those conditions, like powdery mildew and botrytis, they work really well in those hot, humid conditions. But also, so do the microbe consortiums that can outcompete them and suppress those. So again, like trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, if you use those types of consortiums, you
Keeps everything healthy.
Yeah, because they're also going to thrive in those conditions. Things like, that's why I love the microbe world, because they work almost as, a lot of these things produce, target specific and general antibodies that, have negative effect on other things that would potentially cause harm to our crops.
Right. And also, I got to say, Hawaii grows some fire weed. The last time I was out there, we scored some local weed. It was just amazing.
The only problem with Hawaii is that it is so humid. It is like you got to make sure that your weed goes from your cure room directly into a jar, and then anytime that you want to smoke, you need to open that lid, grab your butt out,
put it right back up.
If you let that jar sit out for 10, 15 minutes, man, that thing is
sappy.
Yeah.
So.
The same problem in the Netherlands. It was really a challenge to get cannabis dried properly without climate controls. Because
I think that's the one thing everybody ruins, right? Like Todd,
yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Everybody ruined their weed. We just saw recently, Todd and I saw good weed ruined by poor drying technique, and it was great weed.
Yeah,
it was just ruined by poor. You know what I'm talking about, Todd? Right? That
tasted like mildew,
tasted like wet towels, and it looked perfect.
Looks great.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Canadian, the BC bud that used to come down, Brandon?
Oh yeah. We used to get the Beasters.
The Beasters.
East Coast
Beasters.
It had a very distinct smell.
Yeah, I know. Oh yeah. It was almost kind of like they dried it too fast, too humid, and it was because you get that smell that when chlorophyll is still in there, still left in the product,
and you could tell too. I mean, there was the bud structure. All of that was just like a lot of that Canadian Beaster bud. I'm sure they were using all kinds of crazy systemics and great gross shit in that garbage. But yeah, like we'd get a bunch of it down, and it was just like the buds were heavy, and that's the thing. Like the pound, they were getting a lot for a little, right? Because it wasn't cured out; it was all water weight. It was disgusting. I'm glad we don't have to contend with that as much anymore out here.
Yeah, there's also I smoked because I started smoking when I was a teenager, and I didn't even really smoke chronic. It was a little bit further in. I was smoking Mexican weed. I knew what chronic was, and I can remember specifically the first time I smoked chronic. But it nobody at that time was had distinct names for it. Like they make stuff up every once in a while.
The first strain I actually got with a name. I mean, if you go back to the days of the Piff, which was something that was circulating in New York, you can go back to the New York Haze days, and that and Sour Diesel were some of the first strains that as a youngster I was like buying and being like, yo, this is Sour Diesel. It smells like Sour Diesel. It's dope, So those were the kind of the early building blocks that kind of I remember, the early hazes that were in New York City, the ones that stunk like just a dank stank. And so, that to me is what kind of carved out my But I mean, Todd, of course, OGs are his living, you know, in his life. So, but again, everybody's got that thing that they fell into, and that was the first kind of strain. What was that for you, Brandon? By the way, what was the first bud you got that had like, was it like the chronic that you got by name?
Okay, the first chronic that I ever got was White Rhino.
Oh, dude, that's dope. That's one of my early ones too. I bought some White Rhino in Vermont off of some hippies in Burlington, and it was again poorly cured but delicious bud.
I mean, at the time, I was smoking nothing but Mexican dirt weed.
Right.
Sometimes I would get some Pretendica, but when I first, dude, I mean, I was hallucinating when I smoked that weed.
Yeah.
You know, and it was interesting. But really, what my first thing that was like, it was when I started cultivating. That was when it was like, oh, like these guys knew how to grow weed. The guys that brought me under their wing,
Right.
I was like, oh, these guys know what's up. And that was Afghani bull rider, which was a bull rider, which is a cut that had been around in San Diego, crossed into a Afghan.
Uh-huh.
They had that, and then the Purple Kush, which was the cut. I think it came from Oaksterdam University, out of Oakland. I think maybe out of Oaksterdam University.
Yeah, that was the one that we lost in the raids. Yeah.
So that it might still be floating around San Diego.
Right.
Purple Kush is still floating around. It came from the ultraviolet from my
curious.
Trichome Technology.
Yeah, I think that's the cut that we had.
I'm
And
curious.
that I grew, dude. That thing paid my bills for probably 15 years, dude. Like we kept, dude. I shit you not, dude.
Great
I kept
roommate.
that PK. I kept that PK. I was growing that longer than I was the Afghani bull rider, longer than the sour OG, longer than the blueberry train wreck. Dude,
Yeah,
it was like better. There was like a bunch of stuff that like I went through, but I never stopped growing that PK.
Here's a blast from the past.
2016, I think, was the last time I saw it.
You ever grew any sweet tooth?
No, but we used to get sweet tooth. We would get packs of that to sell when we were out of our shit.
Yeah, sweet tooth was an interesting strain. That was also lost in the Oaksterdam raids. That mother was killed, and then we a couple of years after it was taken and murdered, we went hunting around California for somebody who would have those cuts, but it was really hard to find. Lots of things were lost, man. Lots of things were lost to prohibition, but we've also gained a lot of value from having the plant suppressed for so long. So I'm a fan of the Michael Pollan method. So the Michael Pollan methodology, that prohibition has made this plant survive and stronger. So here we are.
Yeah, we had like our local varieties that were kind of like legends, like the bull rider, the Afghani bull rider, P91, cat piss, stuff like that. But when it came to like more of the work stuff, it was more of the Afgoo and like later on, a little bit later, the Blue Dream hit really super hard. But we would get stuff like Romulan and you don't see a lot of that anymore.
I'm a fan of Blue Dream. I like that flavor. It's not bad.
For me, it was just always one of those.
Because you guys make me feel old because all of that shit is kind of like the newer varieties like White Rhino, Romulan. You guys are all like late 90s kids. And
tell us about the old days there, Tom.
No, you're killing me right now. That's cool. When I hear White Rhino, it reminds me of Amsterdam and my friend Igmar, who created White Widow, and before he sold the whole varietal off to Aryan and Scotty, and they started crossing it with everything. And so White Rhino came way later, and it's interesting to hear. I mean, cannabis is such a fascinating and touching thing for us all, and it's just really cool. But I want to thank you guys for joining us today. And if you guys want to do it again, I think we're going to start doing this on the weekly and having conversations about cannabis and bringing on more guests and talking about different topics. So.
Thank you so much for having us on, Todd. This has been a great little time here in the morning to catch up with make new friends and catch up with old ones.
Absolutely, Brandon. Thank you. From the first time I met you and we started talking, it's always such a pleasure. You're so passionate about the biodynamics of soil and the way it all works, and I really appreciate you sharing it with me because I always enjoy talking to you and I always feel like I learned something, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on. I always like to share what's going on and kind of my thoughts because the key to success is to be able to make other people successful as well. You can't do it alone, and so that's the whole thing. I just want to be able to share because I would rather see small businesses succeed in America than large corporations take this away, because you can have more diverse business models and more creativity as opposed to just like some standard corporate entity that makes terrible products with poor quality control. I want passion with the things that I consume or that I'm associated with. So I want to be able to teach these people how to do this, and the people that are listening are the people that are in the community. The people that are doing cultivation, that are mom and pop businesses, and so this is the right place to be able to share the information.
I really dig that. Could you tell people what's your website and what is your social media handles?
Yes. So social media is rust.brandon. It has a little Grateful Dead symbol on it, but be careful because there is a lot of people who impersonate me and they try to scam people.
Yeah.
And then you can also find Bokashi Earthworks, one word. And you can find products like the Microbe Plus on the website, the Smart Carbon Biofertilizer, which is on the website at www.bokashiearthworks.com.
Wow, totally cool. Hey, Victor, could you do the same thing?
Yes. EmeraldFarmTours.com. Check out the website. The Instagram is at Emerald Farm Tours. Singular farm, multiple tours. We'd love to have you if you're ever in California. Show you the inner workings of Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity County.
That's awesome, guys. Thank you guys again. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. See you guys next
Thanks,
time.
peace.